Canto 20, Circle 8, Bolgia 4, The Fortune Tellers and Diviners. Dante stands in the middle of the bridge over the fourth Bolgia and looks down at the souls of the fortune tellers and diviners. Here are the souls of all those who attempted by forbidden arts to look into the future. Among those damned are Amphiaraus, Tiresias, Aarons, Manto, Eurypylus, Michael Scott, Guido, Bonatti, and Asdente. Characteristically, the sin of these wretches is reversed upon them. Their punishment is to have their heads turned backwards on their bodies, and to be compelled to walk backwards through all eternity, their eyes blinded by with tears. Thus, those who sought to penetrate the future cannot even see in front of themselves. They attempted to move themselves forward in time, so must they go backwards through all eternity. And as the arts of sorcery are a distortion of God's law, so are their bodies distorted in hell. No more need be said of them. Dante names them and passes on to fill the canto with a lengthy account of the founding of Virgil's native city of Mantua. Because he's a fanboy. Now must I sing new griefs, and my verses strain to form the matter of the 20th canto of Canticle 1, the Canticle of Pain. My vantage point permitted a clear view of the depths of the pit below, a desolation bathed with the tears of its tormented crew, who moved about the circle of the pit at about the pace of a litany procession. Silent and weeping, they wound round and round it, and when I looked down from their faces, I saw that each of them was hideously distorted between the top of the chest and the lines of the jaw, for the face was reversed on the neck, and they came on backwards, staring backwards at their loins, for to look before them was forbidden. Someone, sometime, in the grip of a palsy may have been distorted so, but never to my knowledge, nor do I believe the like was ever seen. Reader, so may God grant you to understand my poem and profit from it. Ask yourself how I could check my tears when near at hand I saw the image of our humanity distorted so that the tears that burst from their eyes ran down the cleft of their buttocks. Certainly I wept. I leaned against the jagged face of a rock and wept so that my guide said, "Still? Still like the other fools? There is no place for pity here. Who is more arrogant within his soul? Who is more impious than one who dares to sorrow at God's judgment? Lift up your eyes, and see him the earth swallowed before all the Thebans, at which they cried out, 'Whither do you flee, Amphiaraus? Why do you leave the field?' And he fell headlong through the gaping earth to the feet of Minos, where all sin must yield. Observe how he has made a breast of his back. In life he wished to see too far before him, and now he must crab backwards round this track. And see Tiresias, who by his art succeeded in changing himself from man to woman, transforming all his limbs and all his parts. Later, he had to strike the two twined serpents once again with his conjurer's wand before he could resume his manly lineaments. And there is Aarons, his back to that one's belly, the same who in the mountain of the Luni, tilled by the people of Carrara's valley, made a white marble cave his den, and there with unobstructed view observed the sea and the turning constellations year by year. And she, whose unbound hair flows back to hide her breasts, which you cannot see, and who also wears all of her hairy parts on that other side, was Manto, who searched countries far and near, then settled where I was born. In that connection there is a story I would have you hear. Tiresias was her sire. After his death, Thebes, the city of Bacchus, became enslaved, and for many years she roamed about the earth. High in sweet Italy, under the Alps that shut the Tyrolean gate of Germany, there lies a lake known as Benacus round about. Through endless falls, more than 1,001, Mount Apennine from Garda to Val Camonica is freshened by the waters that flow down into that lake. At its center is a place where the bishops of Brescia, Trentine, and Verona might all give benediction with equal grace. Peschiera, The beautiful fortress, strong in war against the Brescians and the Bergamese, sits at the lowest point along that shore. There the waters Benacus cannot hold within its bosom, spill and form a river that winds away through pastures green and gold. But once the water gathers its full flow, it is called Mincius rather than Benacus. From there to Governo, where it joins the Po. Still near its source, it strikes a plain, and there it slows and spreads, forming an ancient marsh, which in the summer heats, pollutes the air. The terrible Virgin, passing there by chance, saw dry land at the center of the mire, untilled, devoid of all inhabitants. There, shunning all communion with mankind, she settled with the ministers of her arts, and there she lived, and there she left behind her vacant corpse. Later, the scattered men who lived nearby assembled on that spot, since it was well defended by the fen. Over those whited bones they raised the city, and for her who had chosen the place before all others, they named it, with no further augury, Mantua. Far more people lived there once, before sheer madness prompted Casalodi to let Pinamonte play him for a dunce. Therefore I charge you, should you ever hear other accounts of this, to let no falsehood confuse the truth which I have just made clear. And I to him, Master, within my soul your word is certainty, and any other would seem like the dead lumps of burned-out coal. But tell me, of those people moving down to join the rest, are any worth my noting? For my mind keeps coming back to that alone. And he, that one whose beard spreads like a fleece over his swarthy shoulders, was an augur in the days when so few males remained in Greece that even the cradles were all but empty of sons. He chose the time for cutting the cable at Aulis, and Calchas joined him in those divinations. He is Eurypylus. I sing him somewhere in my high tragedy. You will know the place who know the whole of it. The other there, the one beside him, with the skinny shanks, was Michael Scott, who mastered every trick of magic fraud, a prince of mountebanks. See Guido Bonatti there, and see Asdente, who now would be wishing he had stuck to his last, but repents too late, though he repents aplenty. And see on every hand the wretched hags who left their spinning and sewing for soothsaying, and casting of spells with herbs, and dolls, and rags. But come, Cain with his bush of thorns appears already on the wave below Seville, above the boundary of the hemispheres, and the moon was full already yesternight, as you must well remember from the wood, for it certainly did not harm you when its light shone down upon your way before the dawn. And as he spoke to me, we traveled on. Notes. A general note. The rather long account of the origin of Mantua with which Dante fills up this canto often prompts students to ask why he does not delete this irrelevant account in order to spend more time on the diviners. The answer to that question, it could be asked in connection with many other passages in the Commedia, points to the core of Dante's allegorical style. The fact is that once he has placed the diviners in their proper pit and assigned them an appropriate punishment, his essential allegorical function has been fulfilled. Nothing more need be said. Thus, the structure carries all. Once the poem is underway, it is enough simply to name a man as being in a certain place in hell, suffering a certain punishment, and that man is not only located as precisely as an X drawn on a map locates the point it marks, but the sin which that man typifies is located on the scale of value which is constructed into the whole nature of the universe as Dante saw it. The poet is thereby left free to pass on to the discussion of all those matters of theology, history, politics, and science which fascinate him. But there is nothing irrelevant about these multiple interests. Dante's journey is to experience all. He is not simply taking a long walk. He is constructing a universe. As part of that construction, he reaches out to draw data from a variety of sources. These are not data in the scientific sense. Rather, they are typical data. Each of Dante's side discussions considers data that are central to its type. The history of Mantua relates to the history of Troy, to the history of Virgil, to the history of Rome, to the history of Florence. Moreover, the history of Mantua is excerpted as typical from the whole range of history, as if Dante were saying, "Thus are the states of man begun." To advance one of the great themes of the Commedia, the backgrounds of civilization as Dante knew it. Line 3, Canticle 1, the Inferno. The other canticles are, of course, the Purgatorio and the Paradiso. Line 4, my vantage point. Virgil, it will be recalled, had set Dante down on the bridge across the fourth Bolgia. Line 8, at about the pace of a litany procession. The litanies are chanted not only in church before the Mass, but sometimes in procession, the priest chanting the prayers and the marchers the response. As one might gather from the context, the processions move very slowly. Line 10, and when I look down from their faces. A typically Dantean conception, Dante often writes as if the eye pinpointed on one feature of a figure seen at a distance. The pinpoint must then be deliberately shifted before the next feature can be observed. As far as I know, this stylistic device is peculiar to Dante. Line 14, loins. General usage seems to have lost sight of the fact that the first meaning of loin is that part of a human being or quadruped on either side of the spinal column between the hip bone and the false ribs. Webster's Dictionary. Lines 23 to 24, tears ran down the cleft of the buttocks. Since the heads of these sinners are backwards on their necks, their tears would run down their backs, and this is the obvious track they must follow. But what a debasement of sorrow! This is the sort of detail Dante knew how to use with maximum effect. Lines 26 through 30. Virgil scolds Dante for showing pity. It is worth noting that Virgil has not scolded Dante for showing pity in earlier cases, though he might easily have done so, and for exactly the same reason. One interpretation may be that Dante was not yet ready to recognize the true nature of evil. Another may be that human reason, despite Dante's earlier reference to his all-knowing master, is essentially fallible. Beatrice, a higher creature, is so made that she is incapable of being moved by the creatures of hell, as is the divine messenger who springs open the gates of Dis. Line 34. Amphiaraus, another of the 7 captains who fought against Thebes. Statius tells how he foresaw his own death in this war and attempted to run away from it, but was swallowed in his flight by an earthquake. I have Romanized his name from Amphiaraus. Line 40, Tiresias, a Theban diviner and magician. Ovid tells how he came on 2 twined serpents, struck them apart with his stick, and was thereupon transformed into a woman. 7 years later, he came on 2 serpents similarly entwined, struck them apart, and was changed back. 46 to 48, Aruns, an Etruscan soothsayer. He foretold the war between Pompey and Julius Caesar, and also that it would end with Caesar's victory and Pompey's death. An ancient Etruscan city is Luna. Carrara's valley is the Carrarese Valley, famous for its white Carrara marble. Line 46, that one's Tiresias. Line 55, Manto. The text is self-explanatory. Dante's version of the founding of Mantua is based on a reference in the Aeneid, Book 10. Line 63 and following, Benacus, the ancient name for the famous Lago di Garda, which lies a short distance north of Mantua. The other places named in this passage lie around Lago di Garda. On an island in the lake, the 3 dioceses mentioned in line 68 conjoined. All 3 bishops, therefore, had jurisdiction on the island. Lines 95 to 96, Casalodi, Pinamonti. Albert, Count of Casalodi and Lord of Mantua, let himself be persuaded by Pinamonte de Bonaccorsi to banish the nobles from Mantua as a source of danger to his rule. Once the nobles had departed, Pinamonte headed a rebellion against the weakened lord and took over the city himself. Line 106, that one whose beard, Eurypylus, Greek augur. According to Greek custom, an augur was summoned before each voyage to choose the exact propitious moment for departure. cutting the cables. Dante has Virgil imply that Eurypylus and Calchas were selected to choose the moment for Agamemnon's departure from Aulis to Troy. Actually, according to the Aeneid, Eurypylus was not at Aulis. The Aeneid, Book 2, tells how Eurypylus and Calchas were both consulted in choosing the moment for the departure from Troy. Dante seems to have confused the two incidents. Line 109, even the cradle